Okay, so now we want to get to this point whereby we can work with external assets, for example images. In our case it's a logo, and actually it's an SVG image. And then we also want to change the way the font looks like. Right now it's already in poppins, so we'll be using poppins. However, the default font that comes with React Native, I believe it's Roboto. So how do we get from Roboto to poppins? How do we add custom fonts? How do we add like maybe Montserrat, like additional fonts to your React Native project? So this is a very simple diversion from the flow that from where we left off, because we will be using additional assets, additional maybe images, and we want to make sure that we get our project right from the start so that we don't go back and forth. So in this session we'll be adding custom fonts, and also we'll be adding SVG support on our React Native, because SVG is not supported out of the box. So let's see how we go about this. Okay, so the next step is to change this simple sample text that we have here. By default it's showing in Roboto. Let's just close this one. It's showing in Roboto, but we want to change it to have poppins. So how do we go? What are the steps that are required? Yes, so React Native out of the box, it doesn't give you the ability to support maybe a font based on a link like the way we are used to in the web HTML, whereby you paste the link at the top. So the step that you are going to use is tell React Native, or rather configure React Native to have support for all the assets, which are in this case the fonts that you are going to be using. So the first step, as we said, this tutorial for setting up assets, we are going to add our folder. Like the folder we are going to have is for fonts, and then here is where we are going to paste all our fonts. So for example, your app may have just one font, for example poppins. In our case we'll use poppins. Another font, another team may have more than one font, so it's up to you. Yes, so the next thing we are going to do, because fonts, they are things that can be shared, they can be shared across different sections of the application. We are going to create a new folder here in the shared in the presentation shared folder. We create a new folder, and then we call these constants, and the constants that you are going to have in this case is for the fonts. Yeah, so we create a new file, and then we say fonts.constants.typescript. So why is this the case? Our application right now, we know that it only has Roboto, but we want to have another font, like for example in this case font poppins. Then here is where like we'll define our poppins fonts. So always have that behavior of namespacing your properties, maybe your code, so that you know this is coming from this section, this coming from this section. In our case, our poppins is a font. Then if we have another font, it will be like for example export constant font XYZ, and then you have it here. Okay, so we will have different types of poppins. In our case, we can have bold, we can have bold, we can have regular, and so forth and so forth. The way we are going to specify our fonts is actually how we are going to be using them. So for example, in this case fonts, we are just going to say, okay, this is my text, I want it to have a font family of, we just type font poppins, it will autocomplete, and then I want it to be either bold or regular. So in our case, let's just say this is a regular font. Unfortunately, we don't see anything. That is because we have not configured our fonts yet. Okay, so how do we go about configuring our fonts in React Native? Okay, the first step you have to do is to create a new file in the root folder of your application. We call it reactnative.config.js. This one is what will have the configurations, like for our project module.exports, and one of those configurations is the assets. So here in the assets, we just add a new property. In the exports, we add a new property, and it's an array of the assets where we want them. So the thing we are going to paste here, the string inside here will be a relative path to our fonts folder. So in this case is just that you paste it there and then you save it. Okay, nothing is reflected here yet because we need two things now. The first thing we will need is to add fonts to our folder. The other thing we will need is to link the application. So how do we link? The linking is so simple. Let me just show you. You can go with the option of saying npx react native assets, or as we saw, like it's so easy to link assets, we just add a new npm command, and then it will be react native, and then react native assets, react npx react native asset. Yeah, so when we run this, it will automatically go here, and then it will check for the assets where they are, and then it will add them to our respective distributions. Like for example, in Android it will add them to Android, and in iOS it will add them to iOS. Okay, but so far, yes, we have said this is the command that will run. However, we haven't specified any fonts. Even if we have a folder, it's just an empty folder. So I already downloaded the fonts that you are going to be using, and I encourage you to check like Google Fonts. There are so many fonts that you'll have there. So for us, we'll have Poppins Bold, Poppins Extra Light, Poppins Light, all these things. Okay, so here we also have empties. Like here we have an empty bold, an empty regular. So all we need to do is to say Poppins dash bold, and that should be it. And then here we have to say Poppins regular, and that should be it. So let's actually now run two things now. We close our server, npm run, we saw link, let's link it. So it will run that command. As you see, it's going to linking TTF assets to iOS, linking TTF assets to Android. And you notice now in Android, when you open Android, you have in the main folder in assets, you now have your fonts. So that is good. Okay, now let's run npm run start once again. And then here we run Android. Okay, so let's see what we will have. Okay, nice. So we see our font change from Roboto to Poppins. One thing I want you to note, it's a common mistake. You don't have to have TTF here. If you have TTF here, it will actually break your project. So, I mean, it will break the font. So if we have TTF here, you see, like it's going to break it. So remember, it's the way you specify in HTML or CSS without the extension is how you should specify them here. So tomorrow, if you want to change like this one to be bold, it's simply that way, like, and that's it. So we have successfully added font support to our React Native application. Okay, now that was the first thing. What if now we want to have support for our logo, the logo that we saw, and the logo or any other image is an SVG image? That's the next thing that you are going to do, and with that we'll be needing React Native SVG. So how do we go about it? Let's see. Okay, we already have our assets folder. So now the next thing we are going to create here is our images folder. Yes, so the file that you are going to add is, let's call it this logo.svg. This is what you want to use. Okay, the first step is to actually go to npm and search for these two libraries. The first one is React Native SVG, and the other one is React Native SVG Transformer. So just npm this one, copy that, go back to your project, and then you just npm install that. Let's go back here again, we copy this, and then we npm install this one as well. So that's the first thing that we are going to do, and let's wait for a few minutes. Okay, good, it finished. Now we want to just display the image here. This here is where the image will go, here. Okay, so how are we going to do it? We need to configure our React Native so that the configuration can actually support usage of SVG. Okay, the first thing that you are going to do, we are going to update our metro config with these changes like are needed so that the whole project can have actually support for custom. You can think of this as pre-built phase, like you can have anything that you need Metro to do before the actual building of your application. So I'll not be typing so many things. So I already have a config, so let's just paste it here so that we save some time. So what this does, it will use the default configuration. Then this is the section whereby you have to like specify, I want to use this SVG transformer, and then that's it. Then the resolver will resolve assets extensions, like these are the assets extension, and then finally you merge the configuration, your default configurations that are supported by the application, and then the config that you have customized. Yes, so after that we should be able to actually use our SVG. Okay, now the next step is to, before we actually continue, you remember once you install something, you have to actually rebuild it so that it's supported. So we have to say npm run Android once again, and let's see if we are going to have a successful build on the first run. So yeah, SVG was added, and then it's actually finishing the compilation right now, and yes, it finished compiling. Okay, and actually it used the Metro config. Okay, but now our image, where is our image? How we are going to do is simply this. We know the path of the logo, so you have to import logo SVG, the name, like this can be any name, like anything can go here, but the important thing is the path. Presentation, assets, and then we go to fonts, images, and then we say logo.svg, and that's it. So this one can be any name. The only reason it's complaining is because it's not being used. So let's, now you come here, you paste that there, and then I think we should be having our logo expected as string. Let me type string. Okay, let's see what the error is. Okay, the error that we had, the way to fix it is to have, you have to stop your Metro server, and then you also have to like stop your Android build, and then you just npm run start your Metro server once again, because remember what we changed were the Metro configurations. So that means the old configurations were still persisting, and that's why we were not being able to use the SVG config. And then we rebuild our Android once more, and then let's see, we already see this here, so because I already built it, and then it should also like work. And then let's yep, it works. So we can configure the height, and we say 32 for example, and the width 32, and that's it. So that is good, everything works okay. So the next step is to now continue, because this was a vital step, because we'll be using the fonts and the images in so many places. That's why we had to take a detour and go and install the required packages and set up the project right to have support for the fonts and the assets. Okay, see you in the next one.